All right, without further introduction, welcome to this session about the energy revolution and the solutions for the power system challenges. My name is Niklas Wegar. I'm representing Wärtsilä. How many of you have heard about Wärtsilä? Hands up, please. Very good. Have you heard about marine things mostly? Hands up. How many of you have heard about the energy side? All right, a few. Very good, very good. All right, we discussed before getting on stage that it's really an interesting time to be in the energy side now. A lot of changes going on. A lot of items happening and many people talking about energy in a way that we haven't seen before, the ones of us that have been in the market for a while. And I would like to start with a few basics about what's going on out there. And I think it's obvious that we have changes going on in terms of the climate change. And I think it starts to be obvious that we have some changes going on which may or may not cause bigger changes on a larger scale. When we look at what has happened recently with some of the tornadoes through the island of the Caribbean islands and what's going on, are the winters the same as when I was a child? I don't think so. I think we had more snow then and really the 4 seasons that we were used to have in Finland, for instance. And of course, on your right-hand side, we have part of the solution, part of the answer to the climate change. What can we do more in terms of renewable generation, sustainable generation for the future? And it's obvious that we have really a revolution going on now. And I'll talk to you about what we really mean with this revolution. Why is it a revolution when we look at it from a more historical perspective? And this is part of the reasoning because in the past, this was how you used to do power generation. You had your power generation asset, usually a fairly big coal-fired power plant or a nuclear power plant or a gas-fired big unit. You had the distribution and the transmission, and you had the load. And you kind of knew always what the load would be from season to season, from day to day, based on earlier statistics. And for many of the energy companies, it was just catching and in with the money. And now this is changing. This is changing fundamentally. And new business models have to be found. So there's a lot of big changes going on. And we had the wind coming first into the market, so to say. The wind energy and the wind players. You all know this. After that came solar energy. And let's say from a capex purchasing perspective, even cheaper than the wind. And definitely from an operation and maintenance perspective, very cheap. But there are some things about these renewable energies which make them difficult to handle from a power system perspective. And I think you know what it is. It's the variation. The sun doesn't always shine, as you know, and wind is there sometimes, but can you be sure that you have the needed power generation when you always need it? How can we ensure the reliability? How can we ensure that the lights stay on in this auditorium at all times? Especially here in Finland, we are really used to have a reliable power system. How many of you remember when the power has been out the last time? Hands up. Not too many. Go to Bangladesh and ask the same question. and some of them will remember when the lights were on, if I exaggerate a little bit. Now, but there are, of course, a lot of places still that need a lot of generation. They need a lot of new capacity, electricity generation also in order to build up the societies, to ensure education, jobs for everyone, and everything related to what we are used to have, especially in the Nordic countries, a fairly good system for every human being. What is behind this huge, I would like to call it revolution, is a cost development, a price development that's been really aggressive. This is a curve showing the price of solar panels per watts in US dollars. And of course it ranges all the way back to, all right, I'm born in the early 1970s, so around here, when you had really high cost for solar panels. And then you have seen a tremendous change in the cost development now during the 5 last years. At the same time, you see on the other y-axis the global solar panel installation in terms of megawatts. A huge increase when the prices have come down. And to give this into some perspective, the power generation capacity in Finland is around 11 gigawatts. So we have 5-6 times Finland by solar panel install capacity already. And you see how fast it has happened just during 7-8 years. To put something else in perspective, this is how many power plants Wärtsilä has supplied globally. That is since sometimes in 85. We have around 65 gigawatt, which is a little bit more than 1% of the whole global energy capacity. So already today, 1% of the capacity installed globally is by solar panels. 1%, is that much, or is it a small number? After all, there is 99% still that you need to power with some kind of solutions. So quite much is still needed there. But of course, when you see prices going down to $0.50 in August 2016, this is an unstoppable force at the moment, the implementation speed of solar into the systems. Then we talked about the wind, and I'll make this a little bit, easier. The wind levelized cost of electricity prices have come down with 61% since 2009. 61% of decrease. And yes, if you have a failure in a wind turbine, there are O&M costs related, but nevertheless, the capex side, the cost side has been decreasing tremendously during this year. Are they evening out? Yes, they are. Of course, they cannot continue in this way with this rapid price decrease on a year-to-year level, but they will still come down even if they are leveling out a little bit. We have some recent prices now seen. This is the lowest we have seen so far from 3rd of October in Saudi Arabia. A total, so this price was with the solar panels only, but then of course you need to have some auxiliaries, you need to have some string converters, some frequency converters, some cables connections, transformers, and so on, grid connections, switch yards. So the total cost is below $2 per kilo, 2 cents per kilowatt hour in Saudi Arabia now. 300 megawatt solar project that would power maybe around half of Helsinki needs if you have the real power there. Another interesting case, this is from Arizona, Tucson Electric Power Company. They made a bundle deal with solar and storage. PPA means power purchase agreement of $4.7 cents, US dollar cents per kilowatt hour. 4.7. Really, really low price for a bundled solar and storage deal. And at that point, we had people who were saying that, well, now you don't need any peaking power anymore. You don't need any gas-fired solutions anymore, because if you can have this bundle deal for solar and storage, then there's no way out. So the question we are asking ourselves as a company now, Wärtsilä, is there room for us in the future? Or can we rely solely on wind and solar and the energy storage? Elon Musk is preaching that it'll work. We maybe don't share totally this, and I'll talk about that when we go further now. But really interesting strategical question for us as a company, because we apparently build and deliver these, and we have the LNG solutions there as well. So let's bring in some ducks. Anyone of you who know this duck's name in Latin? Me neither. Nevertheless, I brought in a duck here so that it would be easier to explain if you hear about something called the CAISO duck from California. CAISO is the system operator in California, the electric power system operator in California. And if we get rid of the duck, this way, you'll see the back of the duck here and the head of the duck here. What this is the hourly generation on the x-axis during a day. So here's morning, 3 a.m., 6 a.m., 9 a.m., lunchtime, and then afternoon. Here is the y-axis, the megawatts needed, or if you would like to put them in gigawatts, 20 gigawatts needed during the nighttime in California at the moment. And these are curves that we are looking at a lot, because we need to model the daily changes, the hourly changes, in order to see how will our solutions fit into the system. And when you look at when you think again about the poor duck and the back of the duck, this is the power you always need during the day. And why this is dropping down here is because they have projected the solar installation amount in California. So the more solar they will get in California, and you know that it's a lot of sun in California, then the daily, let's say, need for other generation is pushed down. But then comes the problem here with the duck head, that in the evening the sun is setting and it's still hot, so you need coolers, usually electrically driven. You have other appliances, you've been out all day with your iPhones and iPads and whatnot, and maybe some Samsungs as well, and you need to get their energy back to them, and other appliances that need electricity in the afternoon. So you have a huge peak always in the afternoon. And then you would need to ramp 13 gigawatt in this scenario in 3 hours. So you would need to power up like whole Finland in a few hours. Whole Finland in terms of power generation capacity, referring to the 11 gigawatt I talked about earlier. So how do you do that? And when you look at the progress that California is making, because they really want to make a mark in terms of being green in US, they have a 30%, 29% progress in reaching by 2020 33% goal of renewables and 50% of renewables. But not even in California, they think that they can do solely with renewables. Interesting point. The other interesting point in US is that not only in Texas, but in many other states, they have allowed for a really free electricity market. And they have electricity market now, which is a 5-minute market. So they actually allow for price spikes when the wind is not there and the sun is not there, they allow for really high price spikes. And this means that the electricity pool price can be having spikes like this during the day. If you look at the Nord Pool in the Nordic countries, it's really stable. And thankfully enough, we have hydro in Sweden and Norway, some in Finland that we can rely on. And it would of course be excellent if you always would have the hydro there in order to do the balancing of the renewables. But what do you need then, apparently, in order to follow the neck of the duck? You would need generation that can start really fast, that can take load, start to produce power, and ramp up and down in terms of loading really, really fast. You would need to have fast unloading as well, meaning that when the wind blows and the sun is rising, that you can pull down the generation. You would need to have low load operations so that you are ready to go when it's needed. And you would still need to be efficient naturally, especially and totally when we talk about fossil fuel generation. You would really need to have as good heat rate as possible to make the best use of the fuel. What we see now in certain states in US is that it's not the traditional generation which is the base load anymore, nuclear, coal, or similar. We see, especially in the windy states in the middle of US, that the renewables are becoming the new base load. They start to have so tremendous amounts of wind that they can provide the new base load, especially during the daytime when the sun is there as well. But what you need is something that is flexible then for balancing the consumption and the generation. Because you all know that generation and consumption need to be equal at all times. You need to have the scale there and the balance. And yes, you can store some in batteries, but not enough in order to keep the lights on at all times. We've been working a lot around these items because people realize that the wind is fluctuating. People know that the sun is rising and that it's setting every day. This would, by the way, be a perfect curve if there wouldn't be any clouds in between, but then you may also have clouds in between. So you need something there to keep the balance. And we noticed this happening, and we tried to bundle it into a package we call Smart Power Generation. Smart Power Generation is about fuel flexibility. Smart Power Generation is about the energy efficiency. When you operate, you need to be really, really efficient. Smart Power Generation is very much about operational flexibility. How can we have an asset, a generation that can be really fast in starting, loading, and unloading? And that's what our solutions can do. We didn't leave it then with only looking at what could we provide as a solution. We checked a lot and analyzed, calculated together with different authorities, energy companies also, what does this mean for your power system? What can we do to your power system to still keep it reliable, keep it affordable, and naturally also sustainable? And that's what Wärtsilä brings to the market. Didn't I do a great job? No corporate slides before slide 14, right? This is the thing. We bring efficiency to the market. We bring environmental solutions to the market. Gas-based, LNG, clean tech, if you like. And we bring the fuel flexibility. So this is what we bring to the market. How we bundle it is into engine power plants, looking like this. This is one of our first LNG installations in Tornio, which has had recently a mechanical handover, And the first ship with LNG has just arrived to Tornio, so now we will be able to test and validate also with the LNG coming into this terminal. And naturally, when you saw the price curves of the solar side and the energy storage potential, we are looking into how can we do hybrids, a little bit like a Prius of the big power plants. What can we do in terms of battery storage together with the engines? These are our traditional customers, just to give you a few references. We work with utilities, US, Azerbaijan, and so on. These are, of course, electricity companies having a lot in their energy mix. We work with independent power producers. These are usually some investors finding a way to power, and this is especially in decentralized power systems, where there is an opportunity for more or less anybody to come in, try to find a power purchase agreement, invest in their power plant and get the investment paid back. Then we have industrial customers, and this is maybe from where we are originating, from providing power in remote areas or in grid connected areas for cement factories, oil and gas, textile factories and mining. And then we talk to gold mining companies like Barrick in Canada or Sasol, which is a chemistry company in South Africa. As I mentioned, we have around 65 gigawatt of installed capacity all over the world in some 250 countries. So we have a global footprint in that respect. I would now like to dwell into our solutions a little bit, tell you a little bit more details and specifics about engine power plants, how they work, gas solutions, LNG solutions, and then the renewable side. First of all, the prime mover, the core thing for us is still the engines, and it will remain so. For 20-30 years at least ahead, these engines will have a big role in the future power systems. Why? Because they are fast, they are flexible, and when you need them in simple cycle efficiency, they are the world's best. They are better than gas turbines in simple cycle efficiency. This particular engine is called Wärtsilä W31 because the cylinder diameter of the pistons is 31 centimeters. We launched this new product to the market actually last week. It's 12 megawatt in unit size. Here's the generator. Here you have 10 cylinders, and then there are 10 cylinders on the other side. And here's a turbocharger. The interesting thing with this is that you see, here's one of the assemblers. This piece you can get into full load 12 megawatt in 2 minutes only. And when you think about again the renewable side and the variations with renewables, 2 minutes is all you need. So you can wait for the decision to start your asset until it's really feasible from all perspectives. And in only 30 seconds, you are synchronized to the grid and start to provide power. Talk to any power company guy, and these are values that they like. 2 minutes to full load, and if you have a number of these, 10, 12, you can have 100 megawatt, 120, really, really fast. So coming back to how have we been looking into the total power system and what can we do in terms of supporting the power system. These are a few examples from Jordan, 2 fairly big power plants, also from our perspective. One is called IPP3, 600 megawatt, and the other one is IPP4, 250 megawatt. These power plants were delivered as operating on fuel, and then we converted them to gas operation. And the interesting thing here is that before these engines and engine-based power plants were installed in the system, you had the following variation. If you remember the California duck curve, which was a daily curve, this is now a weekly curve. So you go from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but you see a little bit of the same pattern there, that of course you have less need of generation in the night time, and then in daytime when industry, schools, service companies, whatnot is starting, then you need more power. In this case, you have some steam generation, probably coal. You have some combined cycle turbines and some peaking turbines. And you can see a lot of variation up and down. After we installed the engines, we took care of this peaking up and down with engine solutions. And this meant that the steam generation could continue to operate, but they could operate more in base load, meaning that when they can operate in a more stable operational point, their total efficiency is higher. And since we have really high simple cycle efficiency, on a total system perspective, the total system efficiency is higher. So we could still maintain the reliability of the system. We can have sustainable because you cause less emissions when you can operate on a stable point with these units, and so on. So one of the case examples. If we go further and look about this operational pattern, so this is how we are starting and loading these engines. Maybe you recognize this button from the car industry. It's of course reciprocating engines and similar technology to the car industry. And we are almost as fast from the red lights as car engines are, but there's a big difference in terms of efficiency, because we are in the 47 to 49% simple cycle efficiency range, while a car engine is something totally different. So as I mentioned, with these units we can go to 180 megawatt in 2 minutes, and with the bigger gas engines that we build in Trieste, Italy, we can go in 5 minutes to 200 megawatt easily, because you can start these engines simultaneously. You don't have to wait for one and the other and cascade them. You can start them as per the need. And again, the good thing is that you can stop them and unload them really fast. And of course, you can cancel this decision at any point and go back again. And then there's just a few minutes of safety checks, and then you can start again. Several times a day. And this is also good, because the predictability with solar and wind in the system is different to what you have otherwise. And then it's good that you can start and stop several times a day without major impact, or more or less no impact in the whole life cycle from an OTM perspective. Another case example, this is from Turkey, and this is a plant consisting of a number of our 50 product built in Trieste, Italy, gas engines. And this is a screenshot from the SCADA system in the control room. And what you see here is a 2-hour x-axis curve of a historical trend. And then in the y-axis you see a scale from 30 megawatts to 110 megawatts. And you see two different trend pens printed in this chart from the historical operation of this plant. The black pen is the set point coming from the transmission system operator grid control center. So that's what the grid and power system need in order to stabilize the grid. The red curve is how we follow with the plant. And as you can see, they really lie on top of each other here. So you really follow the demand. The interesting thing comes always at this point, or whatever point here, is that where should I go next? Would I need more power? Would I need less power? Can I run flat out for a while? And we tell it doesn't matter, because you can follow however is needed. You can be really chasing the wind, chasing the solar with these types of units. You can go up and down all the time like this. And you see, we follow the set point coming to the power plant with 1 second interval really fast and follow really the power needs. This is also what the power system guys like, and what you as a consumer want to have, because you want to have reliable power, and you don't want to remember when you had a power blackout or some disruption in your power system the last time. If we talk about efficiency, how can we maintain high efficiency? That's based on having multiple units. So you have a number of engines there, all of which are 45, 46, 47, up to 49% of simple cycle efficiency, and then you operate the needed amount. If you have a big unit, usually the curve goes something like this. In part load operation, you cannot maintain as high efficiency. But when you operate the needed amount of engines only, you can always keep up the total efficiency on this high 45-46% levels. So this is part of the beauty of having multiple engines and multiple generating sets in the power plant. The other thing is the reliability aspect here, because should there be some issues with one of these engines, it's 1 out of 8, 1 out of 6, and so on. So you can work on the reliability also on the asset itself. Fuel flexibility is, of course, another interesting aspect, and this is for the guys that are interested in chemistry. So there's, of course, a wide variation if you go all the way from liquid fuels into gas. The main intention with this slide is just to show what kind of solutions we have in order to cover for different kind of gases. The biofuels are somewhere here, so we have solutions in order to operate on biofuels, and the biogases are somewhere here, not visible now in this chart. Solution simply is that there is possibilities for certain fuel flexibility depending on the needs, and this is also important because if you go out to very remote areas, if you have problems with the gas supply, you may have to operate on liquid fuels for a while. And then you can switch back to gas immediately. And the units we have can operate so that if you have issues with the gas supply, you can switch over to liquid fuel without the generator coming down, and you would notice it in the frequency operation. This sounds all fairly good, right? So have we had any successes except the Jordan case with our smart power generation messaging? Are we getting heard by power companies, investors, and the likes from the systems we have? Actually, to a fairly good level. We believe so strongly in our potential with smart power generation assets that we've been writing a couple of books. First, we made a book called Smart Power Generation, an orange book. Then we did another book called Power System Challenges. The first book is sold out, so that maybe you can only find on eBay or something nowadays. The blue book is still available. You can download it at this site. And now recently we made a third book, which is called Goodbye to Deerland. This book tells about a utility in US that's been investing in a coal-fired power plant. And it's built a little bit like a storytelling book based on facts, but nevertheless on a story about a utility guy that's really proud of his coal-fired power plant. But then comes this energy revolution and all the wind assets and the solar into the system. And sooner or later he realizes that he can't operate his beloved coal-fired power plant for the future. Not only from an emissions perspective, but actually from an economical perspective. And at some point he needs to make a decision, what shall I do to keep the lights on in my utility in my company, keep the customers happy. And sadly enough, guys, everything comes down to the money. We have to think about the return of investment. We have to think about what's the value for the end customer in US dollars, euros, or whatever the currency is in these different locations. So we do a lot of analyzing and look into the money asset as well. If, and I know that you will go to the smartpowergeneration.com site, and there you will go further to see real life cases. We've done a lot of modeling in different places all over the world. Different states, like in US, they have different power pools. Like the Nord Pool is in the Nordic countries, they have different power pools in US. In Texas, it's called ERCOT, PGM in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, and so on. And there are some other cases here as well. So we've looked at these different cases and tried to look at what would be the value then in these different markets. I think you remember maybe from the beginning of the presentation this Tucson electric 4.5 dollar cents per kilowatt hour. Really low competitive price for a bundled solar and storage deal. The interesting thing with Tucson Electric and this deal was that you had a lot of people in the energy business telling that this is the end of these kinds of peaking plants or that you would need any other generation, because if you can do a bundle deal of 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour on solar and energy combined, then you don't need anything else. Tucson Electric, 4 or 5 months later, decided to go forward with an investment with smart power generation from Wärtsilä. So they really saw still the need, even though this is a very good price, to have a backup, to have some reliable solution when the wind is not there and the sun is not shining as much as you would like. And this is what the director of modernization project for Tucson Electric says. As we add more solar and wind, we'll need resources that will respond quickly. And these latest generation units with just a few minutes to start and stop is really responding to what we need. The other aspect which I like a lot is the emissions sustainable statement here, because we haven't talked so much about the sustainability during this first part of the presentation. But when you start to look at that, we can reduce plant emissions of nitrogen oxides, NOx, by approximately 60%, 350 tons per year. Then we start to talk about also meeting sustainability targets. And to put this in a chart, this is the projection from the customer Tucson Electric. This would be if they would continue without investing in a new portfolio from now onwards. The blue curve is with a unit from the competition, a turbine. And then the orange curve is with our flexible units. And we're really proud that we can see this 350 tons per year less of NOx's for the Tucson Electric area with this kind of asset. And the rest covered then by wind and solar, which you know isn't causing any emissions during operation. So this is really good. Excellent. Other successes, if we go a little bit closer to Finland, to Europe, here is a case from Germany, from Kraftwerke Mainz Wiesbaden. And this is a case where you don't need solely the electricity generation, but you need some heat as well. You need some district heating for the city of Mainz. As we need in this house at the moment, this is district heated, this room and this house. So you know, of course, that when we go a little bit further north, we have other climate. At least during part of the year, we need some kind of heating as well. So here we will use the heat recovery and heat recovery systems from the exhaust gases of the engines. And when you operate in a CHP mode, you can reach really high total efficiency numbers, above 90%. The other interesting thing here is that these guys will install a fairly big water tank, so that in the night time, when they have excess wind and the electricity prices may be even negative, then they can heat up the water tank and use that as a heat source then during the daytime instead. So ultimate flexibility in that sense. And the CEO here is also appreciating that this is a future partner of renewables and that you can start in only 2 minutes. When you look at this picture now, and I'll show you a real picture from April this year. So this is the coal-fired power plant that they have at the moment. This asset they will have to shut down due to emission regulation fairly and power into the system. And I think you told me that you will meet Mr. Hietanen from Wärtsilä next week. So he was there during this groundbreaking ceremony. And Mr. Hietanen was really happy that we could show that we are a partner of the Energy Act, Energiewende in Germany. I really like this because this also with Lego blocks. It's a little bit similar, but maybe Duplo blocks instead because they're a little bit bigger than Lego. Anyone who likes Lego in the room? Excellent. Me too. Very good. Then I think we need to talk a little bit about the renewables and storage coming into the picture. I already told you that they are a friend of ours and of you and the future electricity system, but we really see that they can support our system a lot. And I would like to give you a very short market overview. I will not go into the details of this one, but when you see in the oil, let's say, providing countries, the OECD countries and the non-OECD countries, you can look this maybe as the developed countries that you maybe don't need so much more capacity, but still the gas is there strongly, but the biggest capacity investment per year will come from the solar. Same thing when you go on to the non-OECDs, the solar part is growing even more. And this is annual capacity additions. Each year, how much more power you need in gigawatts. So solar is really booming, but gas is seen to remain there for quite some time still. And if we look solely on the solar side, and we look at the capacity mix today or let's say 2016, this is how you see it, new technologies. And then the projection until 2040 is that the new technologies and biggest increase will come from solar. And this is really this unstoppable part from the prices coming down and the potential with solar. Now, we happen to have a fairly good reference base, as I told you, and many of which are really in this hot, good solar radiation areas. So we have quite some opportunities to leverage on the installed base and the reputation we have with our customers, and then put solar there in addition. And remember the Jordan case, one of the power plants. This is the projected installation of a big solar plant next to this. So in order to save some of the fuel costs, you can bring solar there. And utility scale, of course, for solar PV is mainly more than 10 megawatt. And of course, you can use this in off-grid situations, in islands, grid islands or physical islands. But there's a lot of potential there with the solar. We are at the moment installing a solar plant, a PV, photovoltaic solar plant next to our existing earlier delivered power plant in Burkina Faso in Africa. You see it there, so here's Africa and there's Burkina Faso. And we have a 60 megawatt plant there at the moment. It's operating on liquid fuel, on oil. And of course, if you can save 85 million liters in 15 years, you start to have a fairly good business case. So here we are delivering 50 megawatt of solar power. We do need quite some space for this, 27 hectares to be exact. But nevertheless, it's interesting. It's really a fast track case, which we are kind of used to, because the animation you saw earlier is usually how fast we can build these power plants, usually less than a year from contract signing, max 1.5 years since contract signing. But here you can see some of the stages. So in March this year we got the contract and then full notice to proceed, meaning that we can start to purchase for the deliveries. And then in January, around 1.5, 2 months from now, it should be in operation. So really fast process to have a lot of equipment installed, all the logistics and all of that. But this is what we're known for also as a company, to be able to be an EPC provider, engineering, procurement and construction, meaning turnkey provider. Another aspect of this climate change is the energy storage. and we touched a little bit around energy storage, and we thought that it could be a perfect match for the future to have some energy storage in the system. And this we have realized as well. So in May we actually acquired a California-based company called Greensmith, who's a very good energy storage integrator. And they have already a number of references, mainly in US, and can go up to 20 megawatt in size. And our Greensmith colleagues claim that they have actually more installed capacity than Tesla and Elon Musk have at the moment. But obviously Elon Musk is doing a better communication and PR message, because I think you have heard more about Elon Musk and Tesla than you potentially have heard about Greensmith and Wärtsilä. But I guess together we can change that. Why we see that engines and storage is an interesting match is because we already talked about these values, features that can be turned into values. We talked about the efficiency. This should be 2 to 5 minutes actually. High ramping capability, 0.5 megawatt per second. High availability, low OTM costs, and life cycle is there. If we add battery storage into the picture with engines, we can have really fast reactions. If we have otherwise fast generation, but when you can switch on the batteries in 0.3 seconds, 300 milliseconds, and have a ramping capability which is close to infinite, high availability, and so on, it's really, really interesting. And talking about a good match, we actually claim that when you tick off these different boxes here, that it becomes a match made in heaven. It's really a nice match with fast engines and then storage in combination to these solutions. The battery prices are also dropping, partly because we have the electrical vehicles come into the system. So that's of course supporting the development here. The prices seems to continue to beat the forecasts, and now we are somewhere here between 230 to 340 something in total installed dollar per kilowatt hour. And some claim that it should come down even faster than this one. Dollars per kilowatt hour by 2022 is some expectations there. And to put this into context, we've been looking at this a little bit from a Finnish perspective. And please remember now this $150 per kilowatt hour as a reference, if they would be the prices in 2022. So in Finland, on an annual basis, this is how many terawatt hours or gigawatt hours you would need, 84 terawatt hours. We calculated that if you would replace 1% of the energy need in Finland with battery storage, and okay, you could put a high price at 1,000 euros per kilowatt. Remember the earlier 150 euros per dollars that was, but let's put 100 euros per kilowatt as a price for the storage. So that would be a competitive price. We are not there yet. Maybe we will be in 2022, 2023 or 2025. We would need this amount of money. And according to our calculations, it's the price of 9 times the Olkiluoto power plant to replace 1% of the energy need in Finland. So our message is, yes, energy storage in terms of batteries will play a role in the future in the energy mix. Will it play a big role? No, it's excellent for doing this really fast response to renewables, but will it be a base load, so to say? Not necessarily, and please remember it has to be charged as well. So it's an excellent complement. And if you want to go to the details about the calculations, I have it there as a small note. But just to give you some curves on that one. So I think we can conclude that there still needs to be something to support the renewables, the wind and the solar coming into the system. And we claim that the gas engines that you've seen is a very, very good complement. Do we need liquefied natural gas? Do we need some other kind of storage? Let's dwell into that and talk about the LNG side and the LNG solutions. This is, again, how a typical peaker would look like. And then you would need some 200 cubic meters of liquefied natural gas. And here, just to have a reference, you see a guy at 1.80 meters. The compression that you can do, of course, from gas to LNG is a factor of 600. So when you compress the gas, the volume goes down with 600 times. The costs currently, and I think this was calculated with 150 euros, or 350 installed as an EPC. So with everything you need for a battery at the moment, the cost conversion LNG compared to batteries is a factor of 50 today. So this means that for a gigawatt hour that you need of generation in a system like this, you would need 2,000 containers of 500 kilowatt hour in terms of compressed energy. So 10 kilometers if you put them side by side in terms of energy storage. So this is one way also at looking at the realistic, let's say, potential of batteries and so on. Excellent complement, but maybe not for the whole. We talked about Germany earlier, and I have some charts from 2017 power generation in Germany. And now you will start to know these curves already, that you have different dates here, and then you have the gigawatts here needed in Germany during the hours and the days. So this is the whole January need, and here you see the July need. And obviously, they have a lot of solar installed in Germany at the moment. So you see that in July, they operate mainly solar and wind, and can have less of coal, brown coal, and nuclear. The interesting thing is that here, if you call it the base load, is around 50 gigawatt, and then in the summertime it is as low as 35 gigawatts. So remember again that the traditional base load is not what it used to be, it's pushed down. But you would potentially need to do also some load shifting, meaning that here you have a fair amount of wind on these 5 days in January, but these 5 days here, it didn't blow. And you need to keep the industry, the services, everything running in Germany, also these 5 days. So where do we get this 1.2 gigawatt of energy in terms of load shifting? And we calculated that also a little bit, and you could calculate it even further to load shift it to the summer period. And we checked the potential of this. These are fairly big LNG tanks. And then we came to the conclusion that you would need 2 million containers and 12,000 kilometers of energy storage in order to cover for the energy need again, if the same price is calculated. So the message here is, again, energy storage, excellent complement, but perhaps mainly for supporting in the peaking. Maybe not the best idea for load shifting from hours, days, and seasons. So if we conclude the presentation, we think that in order to cover with the solar and other renewables, there is an excellent potential with the engines. Probably we will get some help from the electrical vehicles. Energy storage has a role there. We do think that gas in form of compressed LNG will have a role there as well. And you know that we have one foot in the marine industry as well. We've now, as late as in September, also been looking into other potentials for sustainable energy for the future. So we are working with this Finnish-based AW energy company, and let's see if this could be an additional interesting complement to our energy solution provision for the future and within our scope. So to conclude, a total solution provider with energy storage, with solar, either here or there, and as I think you all know by now, the energy revolution from the renewables is really here to stay. Nothing can stop this renewable costs being pushed down, being introduced to the system, helping the systems to grow in a sustainable way. We can support the introduction of the renewables, as we saw from the Tucson case, also the case in Germany. We can answer the reliability and the power system needs by having fast assets that can be started and loaded in a very fast level. We can save a lot of fuel or gas by introducing also solar panel hybrids as part of our solution. The battery storage potential is there, but we claim mainly for reserve operation and fast acting. And we do think that LNG, compressed gas, can be a good backup, and hopefully, thanks to some support from the shipping industry also, being available and at an affordable price into many places all over the world. And we really see that we have these solutions so that we can support the introduction of renewables to help all of us to work for a more sustainable future. And I mean, the thing is clear. I have two fairly young sons, 4 and 8, and that's partly the reason why I like Lego a lot, because I can reinvent my innovation Lego items from my childhood. But I would like to have a globe, a planet for them to continue with their children and onwards also at some point. So I think all of us and the innovation that you can put into the energy systems in the future, once you graduate and come into the let's say society, to help us to find ways to keep this globe sustainable and have a great future for all. Together, I think we can do it. Thank you very much for the attention. I'm happy to take any comments, questions, or let's say claims at any point. Please start. Excellent point. I'll just repeat it. So the question was more about why aren't we focusing on biofuels as a complement to LNG and the potential there. The fact is that we do. The issue is with biogases and biofuels, do we find the needed amounts? And Is it always bankable? Do we have the economics there? We do have, and we are continuously looking at potential still with the biofuels and the biogases. Still, it's maybe not seen, and you're right, I just had it in the chemistry slide, but I should have pointed it out more. So it's there as part of the energy mix. Will it be a game changer? Perhaps not. Unfortunately not, maybe I could say, because there is not the need, the enough capacity there at all times. But it's a very good question. Yes, please.
Your position in power generation in Europe is relatively limited as it stands, which some people might think is counterfactual regardless of renewables being built in Europe. Do you put that mainly then to the excess of baseload capacity which currently exists in Europe, so your position becomes much stronger in the future? Or can you point to other reasons why, let's say, you're smaller in Europe than you are elsewhere?
You nailed it actually, and just to repeat, so the question is why we maybe aren't that visible in Europe compared to other places. The thing is that in Europe you've been able to invest in these base load generation traditionally. Now we start to see that some countries like Spain, for instance, would have maybe invested in other kind of technology in order to cover for the renewables coming in. So a fair answer to that question would be that yes, we see a lot of potential now in Europe. The more renewables coming in, as you saw, the more need you have for the flexible assets. We are really happy to have this German 100 megawatt plant under construction now at the moment. We are really happy that we could announce in UK 250 megawatt power plants in order to do grid stability operation during last year, and they are under construction at the moment. So yes, we do hope and see. The counter thing is that there's a lot of installed capacity still in Europe, which is paid off and may need to be used for some while still, but we hope for still growing our potential in Europe as well. On the other hand, the climate and let's say investment climate and understanding and clear rules are maybe not coming from Brussels at the moment. They really don't know where to go at the moment. So should there be more clarity, then there should be more investments. There isn't generally too much investments in power generation of any kind at the moment in Europe. Did that answer the question? I think we had a question there. Okay, very good question. So the question was about this new 31 engine, and thank you for asking that question, because I didn't mention that it has received a Guinness World Record in the highest efficiency, because that was mostly on the diesel side, and the product we launched now was a pure gas version for the energy side. So we cannot claim that we have a Guinness diploma yet on the gas side, but we know it will be actually the highest in terms of simple cycle efficiency. Your question was more than about the O&M costs, and typical number is around $6 per megawatt hour in US. For the lubrication, I would need to come back to you actually. We do have those numbers as well. And yes, the engines, they use and consume some amount of lubrication oil, still a very small part. But I can, of course, give you more detailed numbers as well. Thank you. I would love to get some more questions. Thanks. So the question was around capital cost with engines versus CCGTs, combined cycle gas turbines. And let's say a ballpark figure for both technologies, capex-wise, is around 750 US dollar per kilowatt hour. Something in that range, so 750. It depends on regions, of course, and of course always the scope. Is it only, let's say, the core equipment, or do you have the turnkey and all of that? When you look at some of the combined cycles, and especially when you grow really large in size, let's say if you go above 500 megawatt, you start to have a ratio where capex-wise it could be more competitive to go with a gas turbine, a big combined cycle gas turbine. And if you then can operate 24/7, it is maybe a better value. But as soon as you start to have some more variety in the system, and you need to look into the OEMs of starting and stopping frequently, then the coin turns over to engines quite fast. Okay? Yeah. So the comment was about turbines maintainability when you do frequent starting and stopping and so on. And of course, we would need to have a turbine guy here to defend their position. That would be fair, right? But factually, they have an equivalent operating hour calculation based on each start and stop that they do, and we are close to zero or no impact, even though you would start 10 times, 15 times a day. And we've done that all the way since 2003 in Colorado, in some of the really windy states, with these assets, starting and stopping them a lot. So the impact on the OEM costs while doing this flexible operation is close to zero. Very good. Okay, one more, please. Excellent question. So the difference in terms of operational cost with wind and solar, I mean, it's huge, and that's why they are winning the game now in terms of the investments and so on. Capex-wise, they are already competitive, but I mean, operational-wise, you don't need any fuel. So it's just then other, let's say, more fixed OEM costs. And solar panels, you need a little bit of cleaning, and maybe after a while you need to replace them, but then they are also going down in price, and usually the density, they get more power out due to the technological development. Wind side, the wind is for free. Of course, there can be some maintenance things with, okay, they don't use so many gearboxes anymore, but whatnot. And of course, offshore is an issue because of transportation of personnel to offshore installations for OEM. I don't have figures in mind, but it's a huge difference since you don't need to pay for the fuel naturally. Okay, good. From this side, please. Questions, thoughts, comments? Okay, yes, please. Yeah, this is a very, very good point. I think that there is quite some potential for both parties to win here if we could have the shipping industry working more together with the power and energy industry. Because clearly LNG is not competitive in all places at the moment. But if we could combine it with the shipping and have hubs of LNG solutions close to the ship routes, and from there have logistics in order for power generation, there's a great potential. And this answers to some of the earlier questions as well. A big potential, but I would like to see still more collaboration between shipping and energy industries, simply to get logistics and transportation costs and related costs down, and then volumes up. And then we always know that with more volumes, the prices will come further down. So, but good development as such. We start to see terminals being built now here in the Nordic countries, and a lot of interest elsewhere as well for these solutions. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent question. So you asked about the type of storage, and that I didn't specify. You're right. I had a few slides about the preferred storage technologies at the moment. We are mainly looking into lithium-ion batteries. Capacitors is interesting, especially if they could develop a little bit further, so we could have even bigger supercapacitors. But on the other hand, we talk about a few seconds only, so it would help us, during the really high spikes and so on. But at the moment, the lithium-ion seems to be the preferred technology. But I hope to see a lot of development in terms of battery technology as well. Hopefully the electrical vehicle, let's say, coming into the picture, and again, the volumes coming from there could be utilized then also for the energy sector. Very good. Thanks. Shall we push for 2 more questions and then we can round off? At least 1? Excellent. We have 2. It has.
If you operate your engines flexibly, how long before the exhaust gas temperatures are high enough that the second catalytic reduction works?
Excellent question, and very good question. And the question was about emission controls, and that in the video it maybe wasn't visible, the exhaust gas cleaning part, the abatement systems and so on, and the SCRs, the catalysts we have after the engines. Naturally, in order to be able to install a power plant to start off with, we need to comply with the emission rules locally. Sure, you have levels coming out from Brussels, and then you have the US levels. You may have some World Bank limits and so on, and you need to comply with these. That's number 1. In order for an investor to build a power plant, they need to have the emissions permit in order. So we need to ensure that we meet the emission levels, and they are sometimes continuously monitored, sometimes on a regular basis. So that's point number one. We need to follow the emission regulations. Then you're perfectly right. In US, we need catalytic reactors in order to clean out as much as possible of the emission side. This Tucson deal is under construction at the moment. But you're right. I mean, it doesn't help so much if the engines are the fastest in the world if the emission control cannot follow the engines. And this is why we've done tremendous R&D during the last 3-4 years to ensure that the control of the catalyst and the urea injection is as smooth as possible and following really the load. And this you can do by control logic today, that you have these two systems talking to each other so that we can prepare the catalyst for the, let's say, peak coming. At the moment, usually, depends on the state in US, for instance, the measurement of emissions starts in 15 minutes from you have a standby situation. So it depends. But the main answer is that we continuously work on ensuring also that the startup emissions should be as low as possible when you do this load following and so on. And when you start to look on an average, we start to be on a very, very good level thanks to uniting the controls of the engines and the catalysts. Excellent question and very relevant considering sustainable flexibility. Very, very good. I think the lady over there had the last question. Usually, you need to put the limit somewhere. Usually, we try to include as much as possible of the levelized cost of the electricity. Usually also the O&M part. So usually it's included. All right. If there is not any last burning question, then I would like to thank you a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and thanks for the excellent comments and questions. A round of applause to you guys. Thank you. And I'll be around if you want to discuss afterwards as well. Thanks. Have a great day.